Okay, I was in the middle of editing the next video when this bombshell dropped. If you've never heard of the OFAC and its sanctions list, buckle up. Having your name on it is a living hell. And now, this man's name is on it. He was added on July 30, 2025, and because of him, my country, Brazil, risks becoming a global outcast, cut off from essential products and services, sliding into one of the world's worst authoritarian regimes. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you how this guy can turn the lives of over 200 million Brazilians upside down, depending on how he reacts to being on the OFAC list. This is Alexandre de Moraes. He sits in Brazil's highest court, the Supreme Federal Tribunal, wearing a judge's robe. But to many, he's not just a judge. He's one of the key architects of Brazil's institutional, social, political, and economic meltdown. When it comes to censorship, persecution, and jailing anyone who disagrees with him, his name comes up first. Politicians and major media outlets already call him Alexander the Great, or simply Zandao, which pretty much translates to Big Alex. If you doubt he's a problem, check out just a few of his actions in recent years against anyone he and his allies labeled a threat to democracy. And trust me, this list I'm about to show you doesn't even cover every crime, illegality, and arbitrary ruling he's signed. It's like he tore up the Constitution and turned himself into the law. One of his most shocking moves was ordering social media networks to comply with his secret orders, censoring and banning anyone who criticized the 2022 elections. The Supreme Court, the current president, who, by the way, was released from jail by that very same court, and the entire clique he belongs to. Because of all that, on July 9, the White House sent Brazil a letter announcing a 50% tariff on all Brazilian exports to the US. This isn't opinion, it's fact. In its first 2 paragraphs, the letter calls out Brazil's fake justice and makes it clear, because of these injustices, Brazil will face a 50% penalty. If you think I'm exaggerating, the White House itself has published a statement on its official website, White House Gov. And the message is clear: the Brazilian government has been threatening the United States for years, especially through its Supreme Court. They point out that the Brazilian court issued hundreds of secret orders to censor political critics and American media companies, imposing fines, blockades, and even expulsion from the Brazilian market if their orders weren't followed. And it doesn't stop there. The same court has been responsible for threatening executives of American companies with criminal prosecution, froze the assets of a US company in Brazil to force it to obey its orders, jailed individuals without trial for social media posts, and opened a criminal case against a US resident. The point I'm making is this: the White House is fully aware of everything that's happening. The statement makes it clear that President Trump is defending American businesses and people, for example, by using executive orders against Brazil. This text was published on July 30th, which was just yesterday. It couldn't be any clearer. The US is taking direct action against Brazil and its regime because of everything they've done. Nearly 4 weeks after that letter, the biggest surprise, Alexandre de Moraes was added to OFAC's SDN list under the Global Magnitsky Act. That officially makes him a sanctioned individual. But wait, what exactly is the OFAC list? What's the Magnitsky Act, and what does being sanctioned actually mean? OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, is the US Treasury's money sheriff. Think of it as the part of the Treasury that monitors and fines anyone, individuals, companies, even countries, who harm US national security or foreign policy. It enforces this by creating sanctions lists. The most famous is the SDN, Specially Designated Nationals and Blocked Persons list. If OFAC puts someone on SDN, it's like a global hands-off. US persons, and often anyone doing business with the US, cannot conduct any financial or commercial transactions with them. That means, once on SDN, the US government can freeze any money or assets the person has that pass through the US financial system or SWIFT network, and it bans Americans from doing business with that person. Now, why the Magnitsky Act? This is the tool OFAC uses for 2 very specific, very serious reasons. 1. Severe human rights abuses, think torture, unlawful detention, even murder. 2. Significant corruption, like embezzlement of public funds on a massive scale. By using Magnitsky against Moraes, the US is effectively saying they believe he's responsible for one or both of those crimes. So what changes for Alexandre de Moraes now? Total ban on US services and travel. He cannot use any American product, app, or system, nor can he enter the US or do business with US entities. Near total financial isolation. Most global banks, even in Brazil, are linked to US banks or use SWIFT. Any non-US bank that deals with Moraes risks secondary sanctions. History shows this happens, and it's alarmingly easy. Reputation shattered, once hailed as a democracy savior by his allies, he's now grouped with dictators and terrorists on the same blacklist. Ouch. Collateral damage to family. His relatives could face the same secondary sanctions, losing access to software, streaming services, bank accounts, you name it. Can you imagine? He and his family might be banned from using a ton of services and having accounts on countless platforms. I can only imagine what's going through his mind. A man who believed he was protecting democracy, now sanctioned by the world's most powerful nation, sharing a list with terrorists and despots. Wild. As I said, Brazil stands at a crossroads. One path is disastrous for Brazilians but good for the regime. The other is great for Brazilians and terrible for them. Either way, someone will be left disappointed, and millions of Brazilians hope it's the regime. Since this is all so fresh, here's what we know so far. Next sanction. US companies might be barred from servicing the Supreme Court itself. Travel ban. The US is considering banning Brazilian fans from the 2026 World Cup. Financial markets, traders are already stress testing scenarios post-sanction. Europe steps in. MEPs, members of European Parliament, are calling for EU sanctions on Moraes too. Brazilian banks at risk. Banco do Brasil and the big private banks with US ties could be forced to cut Moraes off. STF statement. The Supreme Court issued a solidarity note, claiming Moraes was just doing his job and upholding the Constitution. But let's be real, that was expected. Most justices back this regime and helped build it. And of course, some journalists are defending him, saying he has no US assets, his passport expired, blah blah. That's not news, it's just cheerleading. Now the big question is, how will Moraes react? This is the million-dollar question. Will Alexandre de Moraes accept this and step back, or will he fight back with all his power? Because an entire nation's fate could hinge on his choice. If he backs down, Brazil might breathe a sigh of relief. Trump could spare 200 million Brazilians from the same fate. If he fights back, he'll be saying, "Bring it on," giving the US every reason to tighten the screws on Brazil itself. If individual sanctions don't work, or worse, provoke Moraes to double down, Brazil could face sweeping sanctions. We saw a taste with that 50% tariff. Some sectors were eventually spared, which was a relief for our already fragile economy. Secondary sanctions can target any non-US company that helps Moraes evade restrictions. Brazilian banks with US ties must choose, obey Moraes or obey the US. If they side with Moraes, they risk massive fines and bans from US markets. No US dollar access means skyrocketing rates, plummeting purchasing power, and a near impossible environment for sending or receiving funds internationally. In short, a full-scale economic collapse. Brazil is incredibly vulnerable right now. Red ink budgets, skyrocketing debt, one of the highest real interest rates globally, shrinking foreign investment, current account deficits, and an economy dependent on expensive credit. Millions of Brazilians are holding their breath until Friday. Brazil's only hope: 1. Congress impeaches Moraes quickly and he can't reverse it. 2. He resigns voluntarily. 3. He accepts all of Trump's demands to save himself and Brazil. But let's be honest, after 6 years of power grabs, it's hard to see him backing down, unless he's truly worried about his family facing the same sanctions. Even then, will he feel anger, shame? With possible narcissistic and psychopathic traits, it's anyone's guess. The only certainty we have is that the United States has nothing to lose and can continue to apply sanctions not only to Moraes, but also to other agents and officials responsible for the crisis in Brazil. We already have information that 2 other Supreme Court justices are in the US crosshairs and have so far been spared the same sanctions. This isn't my claim. It comes from Eduardo Bolsonaro and Paulo Figueiredo, the 2 main Brazilians who have been exposing the situation in Brazil to the US. The threat is real. One of these justices, who could face sanctions if the regime continues to attack the US, is concerned because his $3.9 million property in the US could be confiscated by the government. Will the other members of the regime abandon Moraes? We don't know. However, they have already issued letters and even posted on social media defending their actions and the Supreme Court, portraying it as a just court that supports what Moraes has done and continues to do. No matter the outcome, Brazil's ordeal is a warning about what happens when justice gains too much power. And it's a message to you: never hand that much authority to one person. especially someone with a history of abuse. If you value your freedom, don't wait until it's gone to appreciate it. Don't let anyone decide how you live your life. It sounds cliché, but these are the moments when we truly value what we should have protected all along. If you want to help me keep making videos, please subscribe, hit like, and share this with others. And if you'd like to donate, check the description and pinned comment for a link. Every dollar warms my heart and motivates me to continue. I'm John Magellan, and I'll see you soon, God willing.